Hello, everybody, and welcome to today's webinar, How to AI, Treating AI Like a Teammate, Not a Magic Wand. We're happy that you could be here and join us live. If you're joining us today, this is the first of a three-part series this afternoon around AI. So we're starting with this session, How to AI. We're moving on to a panel on AI native learning and development operations, and then we're ending with some of Intellum's AI innovations. So we hope that you can join us for some of that. Just some quick housekeeping before we get started here. This webinar is being recorded, so if you want to come back to it, if you want to take notes, share it with a colleague, we will send you the recording after the webinar is over. The chat is open, and we would encourage you to just drop us a line, let us know that you're here. We love to hear from you as we're going. These are pretty interactive webinars. That said, if you do have a question, there's a Q&A box at the bottom of your screen. If you can use that to put questions, Dave and I are going to take some questions later on in the webinar. But if we don't get a chance to answer your question live, we do want to follow up with you. So please just use that Q&A box, and that way we can keep track of all those great questions. What else? There's closed captions at the bottom of your screen as well, if that's helpful to you. And then at the end of the webinar, there will be a survey, right? So this survey, like any, workshop or training or webinar that you go to, allows us to get some feedback on what's working, what would you like to see more of? We read all of those responses, and our content and program is really heavily based on what you all are looking for and what would be helpful to you. So I encourage you to do that. Just some quick intros. My name is Shannon Howard. I live in Black Mountain, North Carolina. Yes, about to get hit with this snowstorm, but hopefully not. So stay warm if you're in that whole area that's getting hit. I've been running Intellum's content marketing and programs for the last several years. And then Dave, if you want to introduce yourself.
Yep. Hi, everybody. Dave Slowinski, SVP of Solution Architecture at Intellum. We too, like a lot of people in America, I think right now are bracing for the storm, but great weather today. I've been with Intellum for the past 10 years in a leadership role, working with our customers, how to implement our platform. So understanding your program, getting the best out of our platform. Prior to that, I was on the other side of the table, spent equally as much time in my career as someone leading L&D programs at the enterprise level at a couple of different companies, which hopefully gives me a unique perspective, not just as like from the platform side, but also from the program manager side. So looking forward to today.
Yeah, and maybe some helpful context for those joining us. So Dave and I, we are not AI experts, okay? We don't have PhDs in AI, but we're just here to share some of what we've learned that can be hopefully be helpful to you. So back in 2024, we worked with Forrester, commissioned a research study of 300 education leaders, and we asked them at one point in the survey, what are you planning to do with AI? How are you thinking about AI for your programs? And about 98% of those education leaders said within the next 12 to 18 months, I expect to be using AI in my program in some form or fashion. And we are now, in early 2026, living in that reality where the majority of education teams are using AI. So the research on your screen is actually from an AI and learning and development report that Synthesia and Dr. Philippa Hardman worked on and released earlier this year. And it talks about what are people doing with AI in learning and development. And what the research is telling us, what the data is saying, is that most of us are using AI, but what is different is maybe how we're using it, our use cases, and then also where we are in implementation. So if you are in the early stages where you've been like thinking about AI, how it can be practically applicable to your programs, but you're not quite sure what to do with it, how to use it, we hope that today will be helpful to you. And we want to talk about how to think about AI and how to use it well in this session in particular. So just a quick kind of agenda for our conversation today. When Dave and I were preparing for this, we thought, dang, this is a meaty topic. Like we could talk about AI all year in its forms and facets and have a great time, and it would probably be really helpful, and we'll probably do that to some extent. But today we want to find an opportunity to land not kind of at the 30,000 foot view. We don't want a high level overview. You probably already have that, but we're not going to get super technical either. So if you wanted to talk about RAGs, one of our panelists of the next webinar would probably be happy to jam with you. We're going to aim somewhere in the middle. And our goal here is to help you to be kind of conversationally fluent and execution ready when it comes to AI. So we want to help you think about how can I be using this in my programs? How can I prepare for it? What does it take? What does it require from me to be successful? So that's where we're trying to land today. We're going to start at the top, key AI definitions. And the goal here, we're not going to spend a ton of time there, is just to make sure we're all talking the same language. We don't want to make any assumptions about what something is or isn't or where people are at today. We're going to talk about AI versus generative or Gen AI, what each of those things is good at, how we can be thinking about them, how we can interact with them. We're going to talk about what it means to be AI ready or what it takes to be AI ready. How can we prepare our content, our programs, our operations to prepare for an AI powered future? And then we're going to close by talking about how to work with generative AI like a teammate. So, kind of like that webinar, getting out of the magic wand and thinking more like how can we partner with Gen AI. I've also got some resources for you because we're doing it kind of that, between a flyover and deep dive somewhere in the middle there. We're going to share with you some additional resources that we've created that maybe are helpful reference material for you. So I'll pop those in the chat. But now I'm going to turn it over to Dave just to kind of give us a high level overview, AI terminology wise.
Yeah, so it's easy, maybe too easy to lump everything together when talking about AI and just not making it some important distinctions. So just as we're thinking about what we're talking about today, trying to make some of those distinctions. When you think about just the term AI in general, we're talking about the overall system that it essentially might replace what a human can do or take some human intelligence to do in the past, but something AI has shown the capability of doing. So when we talk about AI generally, it is a broader sense of that type of system. Um, and it's been we've all been talking about the past couple of years, but it sort of predates that. And before earlier, we might talk about machine learning, which in its own way, it's part of AI, but that's more about what's not what a human type of intelligence, but more of like that pattern recognition, things that algorithms are really good at. But that's an important part of the overall AI conversation. With generative AI, especially recently, most people are talking about generative AI when they talk about AI, and that's when something is actually being created. Whether it's creating a text summary from the meeting notes of this meeting, or Nano Banana creating images, or using Claude Code to create some code. That is stuff that's being created by an AI model, which takes us to the next term, that model, which is as we have here, sort of like the brain, behind the system that's doing the generation or doing the prediction. And that is usually, like right now we're talking about large language models, but it's expanding to different types of media. But that's when you talk about someone like Gemini from Google or ChatGPT from OpenAI. That's the model that is doing the generation or the prediction. And prompting is how we interact with the AI. So those are the instructions that you're giving the model to do something. And finally, output is what comes out of that. So, it could be a chat interface where it's just text coming back at you. It could be image creation. It could be code creation, but that output is what the model produces. And that sort of rounds out sort of the AI picture, at least from the basic perspective. Um, so going next, so digging a little bit deeper. So a lot of us, especially in like our day to day doing our job, might be mostly about generative AI. But I want to call out the difference between predictive AI and generative AI, because especially as we get into L&D programs, and a lot of what I can share today is sort of based on Intellum's approach to this in our platform, isn't limited to generative AI. In fact, there's a lot that is equally, if not more valuable from the predictive AI side. So when I talk about predictive AI, I'm talking about a level of personalization when you're working with a model, or the model is embedded in a platform that you're using. That could come in the form of recommendations of what should I focus on next? If I'm on a platform and in my LMS and I'm trying to learn something, how can that platform predict what I should do next? What should I learn next? Um, Whether it's a form of making suggestions, recommendations, understanding what I'm doing to get to a specific goal. The predictive AI can see a pattern based on the data that it has to work with and seeing my activity, and it can make some predictions based on that pattern and trying to complete that pattern. And of course, all of that is produces data, and those analytics can be fed back into that prediction model and continue to improve it. So we'll talk a little bit more about that, but that's maybe doesn't get quite as much attention nowadays as the generative AI side. And when we talk about generative AI, that's when we're talking about creating content. And in the context of L&D, that might be creating your course or creating the outline that's going to be used for your course. It could be you know, taking existing content and rewriting it. It's creating something new. It's generating something new based on a different type of source. You might want to do that if you're trying to take existing content, change that tone, or rewrite it for a different uh, difficulty level. I mentioned in passing summarizing. That's something that generative AI is really good at, taking a video and summarizing creating a transcript, summarizing that, and giving you content that's easier to consume. You can even see generative AI in more advanced scenarios like role plays or creating more complex content that combines different media. So there's a lot to generative AI and it's evolving quickly.
I meant to mention earlier too, and so I'll kind of jump in here and add it, that I mentioned Dave and I are not experts and we're on a journey and y'all are on a journey. So if you have thoughts as we're going, things that you've tried, things that you've found helpful, feel free to throw it in the chat, right? We learn better together. That's why we host these webinars, is just to continue learning from each other and foster a space for conversation and participation. Okay, so we talked about kind of AI terminology, predictive versus generative AI. Dave mentioned a lot of us, when we think AI now, we're largely thinking generative. This is where a lot of the use cases are. And we're going to talk about now how to get ready for AI, right? So, AI success overall is a business initiative. This is not a team or department thing. This is a business initiative. And so, I don't know about you, but I feel like a lot of people with AI, it's been like, waving a magic wand and like pointing it at something and then applying AI to it, and magically it's supposed to work, and it's magic, it's incredible. And I don't know about you, but that doesn't always work, right? There are times when like generative AI does something and it does totally seem like magic. And you think about maybe the first time that you used ChatGPT and thought, whoa, what future world am I living in? So there are times when it can seem magical and it can be pretty easy, but we're going to talk about how do we actually prepare our content, our programs, our operations for an AI first future, because it's not all waving a magic wand, pointing and everything is transformed. If it was that easy, I think we probably all would have applied AI on top of things already. So we're going to talk about building that foundation for AI readiness. And like with anything, so if you've been on Intellum's webinars before, you know that we are really, really, really big on education strategy. That when we're talking about education programs and what makes a program successful, it really starts with strategy, thinking about that whole end-to-end experience. And then we're taking that and applying it into a tool or technology. So today, when we're talking about AI, we're talking more tool agnostic. Of course, we work for Intellum. And if you want to, you can dive deeper this afternoon with Anderson into what Intellum is doing with AI. But the tool is just one part, right? We want to focus more on that like strategy, high level overview of what does that look like. So I'm going to turn it over to Dave to talk about predictive AI and what are the things that predictive AI needs to be successful.
Cool. So in my role at Intellum, I spend a lot of time working with our product team as we develop AI features within our platform, and also with our clients and helping them prepare, how to use that or how to leverage that to improve their programs. And you know, everything sort of starts and ends with data, right? The data that you have to work with is going to influence how good the content can be, and the data that you get on the other end is going to influence what you can do with it. So, um, Intellum as a platform is well suited for this. We expose a very granular level of detail. So as learners are interacting with content, every step of the way, we're capturing that data, and it's organized well in the database. So AI can go in and from a predictive side as well as generative, it can see these patterns in the data. Um, so that data is important. So you can never collect too much data, really, if you're looking to implement something that is related to predictive AI. So whether that is data about the user and their profile, the more you know about the user, the more details you know about the user, the more you can personalize their experience. The metadata that you have with content can help you do things. The signal that you get back from the learner interacting with the content, the enrollments and data around that is critical. So having going into any program and any strategy, thinking about data first is only going to help you. From there, it matters. Structure matters. Just having unstructured data is not going to be as useful as having good structure to it. And we've taken that seriously at Intellum in our products in how we're rewriting different parts of our code, whether it be in our LMS platform or in our Evolve product, to make sure that how our platform is structured and how the data is structured within it is optimized to, and really in a native way to be able to take advantage of predictive AI and generative AI. It means the content is clean. It means there's plenty of opportunities to capture different metadata surrounding the user, the course, the enrollment, and that we're consistent in how we apply that structure across the platform. So in whatever platform you're using or whatever program you're developing, you know, think about data, think about structure. Those are really important. And then, for any platform that's trying to launch an AI initiative, trust is important and becoming more important every day. And that with trust, that means the governance of the data. Privacy of data is always important. Transparency, from a company, transparency to the user and how that data is being used. Um, and ultimately, to increase that adoption, you have to have that. Without that trust, you're not going to get adoption. Maybe a great feature, but if you don't have the trust for people to, give it a chance, you're not going to get that great adoption. So, from an Intel perspective, as we're looking at how we incorporate predictive AI into our platform, those are three priorities for us. So I mentioned, how important data was. So what does good data look like? From the learning perspective, um, the learner signals, enrollments generally, most of those signals are around the enrollments. That's the user's interaction with the content. Um, but enrollments is pretty broad. It could be completions is a very important term. But if you think in terms of that user journey, it starts with acquisition. Are they getting into the platform? Are they finding content? Are they completing what they started? So completions as a subset of the enrollments is an important signal. And these are things that you as a program leader can use to measure the success of your program, but it's also something that AI can leverage to send you information back so you can get ongoing, signals back from the AI about how successful a program is. Um, and assessments, takes that to the next level. A typical enrollment course could be just a started enrollment or completed enrollment. But if you're assessing your users for mastery, then you have additional data, whether it be at the assessment level, a score and pass efficacy, passing and failing, or it could be down at the question level and looking at question level analytics to see how individual questions are performing, and a good performing question versus bad performing question. Um, how do you know based on user responses? Things that you could do in some platforms, including Intellum today manually, but AI and predictive AI can make that so much easier because that's what it specializes in, taking all this data, synthesizing that, and giving you, some direction from that. Um, so if we move away from enrollments and focus a little bit more just on the content, what can you do around content to, make sure that like you have good data? Tagging is important, right? If you think about content or courses in general, you usually think about what you would compose, like what the user is consuming. But it's more than that. It's like how that content is tagged so you can identify it. So based on an initiative, based on a modality, based on certain skills that it might help the user improve upon, the difficulty level, the owner of that content, whether that be the author or more than just the author, but a broader group that it applies to. And then also, if you're thinking, this is serving you as the program manager, not just the learner, but version history, like all of this, if you think about from the admin perspective of what can you gain from AI, that version history, that is more data, and tracking changes to a course over time can be useful information. Think about predictive, like what change should you make next? If you can look back at the history of changes you've made in the past and then changes to things like enrollments or completions, that can help influence or predict what you should have in a future version. And then finally, taking about signals at the user or organization level, the more information about the user, the better. the more you know about their profile. If you know someone's role, you can predict what information might be or what courses might be useful to that person based on the role. That could be influenced based on what region of the world they're in, how much experience they have, what part of the company they're with. These are all different data points that are useful that help you personalize a program and helps AI do that at scale.
And I know, Dave, we had talked about kind of the metadata and making sure that all of that metadata is there, right? That we're filling in things like descriptions, course descriptions, because sometimes we leave those blank, but that's helpful for the AI to be able to reference. Or if we're using videos, having transcripts so that the AI can read the transcript because it's not reading the video, and things like that. Or to even tagging, difficulty level. You talked about that in content signals of, is this beginner, intermediate, advanced? So we can understand, like, even if we're working with generative AI on course development, if we are saying, okay, this is a course that's already a beginner level, or these people are beginner level, now the AI is kind of able to look at like what is considered beginner level, what is considered intermediate level. So we're providing it a lot of that information to be able to do its job well.
Yeah. Yeah, and I'll just say real quickly, give you a little more insight on the Intellum side. So we have, in our for the learner that is using our LMS, predictive AI is really important. That really combines that metadata about the course, which is really real everything about the course except the content. All the things that Shannon just mentioned. And our predictive AI will look at, who is the user, what do we know about the user, and what is all the metadata around the course, what do we know about that? And that's how we're looking to make those matches and make those predictions about what would this particular user be interested in doing next. So the time you spend to, add that additional data to the course, to the user, is really going to benefit and help you if you're looking to incorporate AI into your program.
Mhm. I feel like everybody who's been on the wagon of good data for a long time is like, you know, finally it's like the world where clean data is so important. We get to live in, it's now a priority, business priority. Okay, so on that note, of business priority, we mentioned that AI success is really a business initiative. And so when we're thinking, especially on the predictive AI side of things, a lot of the success of predictive AI depends on this cross-functional collaboration because you could have AI layered over your LMS or embedded within your LMS, but you probably want that to be connected to other things, right? Maybe a digital product adoption tool that you're using in your product. Maybe it's connected to a measurement platform. Maybe it's connected to a customer success platform. Maybe it's connected to your CRM or your HRIS or your um, HCM, right? Like maybe you just have a whole tech stack of things that you're using. And so you want AI to be able to reference all of these data points, right? So if we're thinking even going back to some of those like organizational role tenure, what department are you in? You might be pulling that from your HRIS. And so we want to be thinking about how do we collaborate across the company. And this is really where I think the most successful education programs do a good job, but it's also one of the hardest parts of our job. Last month, when we hosted a panel on, 2026 trends in L&D, Angela Masella, who's a VP of Workforce Development at EPAM, was mentioning this is something that a lot of folks are struggling with, is that the biggest blocker to adopting AI within an organization, especially for learning and development or education teams, is that it really requires us to work cross-functionally. It requires us to work with legal and security, with IT, with other departments, and maybe we're not used to doing that. If we're honest, anytime you're working cross-functionally, it's slow. It can be pretty painful. It's just a lot more work, right? If we're looking at what can I do, things can move faster. And that's why I think that we have focused so much on generative AI because we have so much more say over what we do there and it's faster, easier to implement. And there's good use for that. But when we think about where that game-changing power is for your education programs, it's largely on this predictive side. It's AI tools and technology that will allow you to surface personalized learning and predictive recommendations that are looking at program performance and providing you with insights on what needs to be updated or changed or using AI for performance support, right? So it's things like this, which is really going to require that cross-functional collaboration. And so I just wanted to make sure we called this out here because I think it's a big part of this AI readiness is Are we connecting? Do we understand what our security and legal teams are looking for? Do we know how to partner with our IT team and the things that they're looking for? Do we know what our current AI policies are or how AI tools are being vetted within our company? And so that is a process, but it's worth undergoing just for that to be able to leverage the predictive side of AI.
Yeah.
And kind of to that point, um, I don't know, put together a little thing here around, but just to think about how, like with any change, change takes time and it goes through stages. And so any new initiative that we undertake usually starts very ad hoc. We're trying things out, we're experimenting. And so you'll see that at the base level of the pyramid here is that we're giving tools a try, right? So how many of us, and you can put it in the chat, have tried Perplexity or Gemini or ChatGPT, or we've looked into Cluso or Synthesia or HeyGen, and we're looking at these different tools to see what do they do? How do they work? Like, would this be useful for our program? And we're starting there. And then as we grow and mature in our use of AI tools and technology, as we're adopting AI, we're starting to implement standard workflows. We have guardrails. We're structuring content and metadata, like Dave was talking about, and we're thinking about how do we actually design our content development process with AI in the mix. Like, how do we think about preparing AI when we're developing our content, right? So, even that idea of having transcripts for every video, we're making sure that our systems are connected, that we have ways to measure what AI is doing. And then ultimately, we're looking at this AI powered future. So, I think it's helpful to think about this idea that it is a process and we kind of go through one step at a time. And so, if you're earlier stage, all good, like most of us are in those earlier stages, even companies that have developed their own proprietary AI are still relatively early stage. They're not living in a totally AI powered world, and it'll take us some time to get there. But we're working through each of these stages and we're being really intentional to work through those stages so that we are prepared for the future and everything that AI can do for us. Dave, anything you want to add on before we transition to talking more generative AI?
Yeah, I'll just say add to that that the collaboration with other groups in your organization can really help, climb these steps or get up this pyramid because there are going to be people at different stages. And if you have someone else in your organization that's already adopted a tool that has security and legal clearance, that may be a tool that could work for you. Or even if it's a different tool, they may have uh, taken certain steps to help identify like what is that workflow, what are those necessary guardrails, what is that structure that you need. So um, you know, that can be a big boost and just improving your speed to adopting something by being able to leverage some of the work that some of your colleagues have already accomplished.
I like that. Yes, not reinventing the wheel if someone has already done the same thing internally. Okay. Um, so generative AI, right? Dave was talking about this is something that creates, it generates. This is a lot of what we are using it for in the world of education because we can create our biggest obstacle to moving quickly has always been content development. It just takes time. With generative AI, we can create content faster if we do it right. So when I was first learning about generative AI, I do this with every tool, and I think we understand this as education people, is it's not just learning about a tool, what buttons do I click, what do I do within the tool, but how does the tool inherently work? How do I think about it so that I know when I'm clicking the button why I'm doing it that way? So I was trying to understand how does this generative AI thing work? Can someone talk me through it? And so I sat down with Neil Ballar, who's one of the founders of Cluso, great AI powered tool. And he shared this advice with me, which is to think about generative AI as a new hire. So, what do we do when we have a new hire? And feel free to drop in the chat like things that you do for a new hire. But if I'm thinking about a new hire, I have onboarding for them, right? There's maybe some HR things, but then there's maybe some department specific things. Maybe we're showing them examples of content that we've already created. We're having them go through courses and content that already exist. We're giving them brand voice guidelines. We're giving them some instruction around what instructional design frameworks we're using, right? We're giving them this input to help them understand. Like usually when you hire, let's say, an instructional designer, they we're not hiring someone who doesn't know how to do that. We're just trying to help them figure out how do you do that here in this context. And so we're giving them that information. But then with a new hire, like let's say you give them all this information, they read the brand voice guidelines, have done the onboarding, looked at existing content, they know we're using Addy or whatever. Do we send them off and just let them publish freely in the LMS? Probably not, right? We want to review their work, check their work. So I remember doing this with training curriculum developers, is reading their content, and it wasn't bad content, but it was the nuance of how we spoke as a school. So it was like, hey, actually, we don't refer to our learners that way, we refer to them this way. And it was feedback like that that was necessary, helpful. And so if we think about Gen AI as a teammate or a new hire, we're thinking about not just giving it input, but we're reviewing the content and we're providing that feedback. And so it's not just thinking that I can go and if I have the best, most well-structured prompt, like, yay, it just does what I asked it to do. We're thinking about really training it and spending some time with it the way that we would with a new hire. But the thing is, right, this new hire can stay with us for forever. And we can,
Mhm.
and they will continue to learn and grow with us. And they, don't cost as much. So that was helpful for me to just to think about, oh, if I think about it in that context, I have maybe a better approach to how I'm working with generative AI. And so if we think about, what does Gen AI need for you to be successful? And again, feel free, I'm a very participatory person. But has anybody ever asked ChatGPT to come up with a strategy or just to come up with something and you just said, hey, can you create, an L&D strategy? I was wondering, has anybody tried that? And if you have tried that, what happens is it gives you generic ideas, right? It gives you something that looks really good, but maybe it doesn't work for your business why doesn't it work for your business? Because it doesn't have the context, right? So if I was going to ask it to come up with a strategy, it needs to understand what is my business? What does my business do? What already exists today? Maybe how many people are on my team? What is the makeup of my team? What are our business priorities? What are the goals and objectives that we're tasked with as a team, as an organization? And so I need to provide it with all of this information for it to do a good job. So when we think about engaging with a lot of these generative AI models, they have a lot of great information and best practices, but what they don't have, but what we need to give it is context. We need to help it to understand our business, how we work, how we get things done, and we need to be able to provide that. So that could look like giving information around audience and persona, those different skill levels, what department, what team. We want to give it learning objectives. What is the goal that we're trying to achieve with this content, or what are we trying to achieve with our education program as a whole? We're giving it constraints around time, around format, brand voice guidelines, things like that. Source material, which isn't just the source content, but this could also be your company's unique point of view on things, right? So it's not just source material as in like here's how the product works or here's how this thing happens, but maybe it's our company's unique story point of view on something that we're also providing. And then of course we want to give examples of good, and I think this is something that we often forget is what does great look like. And I learned this earlier in my career when people would ask me to do something is I would just ask them, hey, have you seen a great example of this? Like what does great look like to you? And because I want to know and be able to model off of that, and AI wants to know and be able to model off of that as well. I'm just looking, Divya said AI slop is real and sometimes works with a circular logic. It appears to make sense, but really doesn't have a distinct viewpoint unless we give it context. Totally. What Divya said, if we don't give it specific context, specific instructions, specific feedback, we're going to get very generic where it sounds good, but it really lacks depth, meaning, and purpose. So those are just some thoughts around interacting with Gen AI. And I know Randy had asked about hallucination, so I actually want to talk about that. Dave, I'm going to pass it over to you to talk about a workflow for working with Gen AI, just simple process here.
Yeah, and so I'll use the example. So there within the Intellum platform, there's a generative AI piece called the Creator Agent, which you can use to create a course. But you could do the same. You could go into Gemini, you could go into ChatGPT, and like try the same thing. So if you don't follow the structure that Shannon's talking about, and don't have a workflow, you could just go into any of those tools and say, create a course for me. I want to learn Python, and it'll come up with something, and it'll probably be not terrible, but it won't be great because regardless, the model has all the knowledge in the world about Python in general and about learning models and things, but it has knows nothing. If you just ask that, it knows nothing about what is your goal, what are the learning objectives for this course, who is your audience, like how advanced are they? So that's the importance of that structure and this workflow really comes into play there. So and I I think from I can speak for Intel, we're a big believer in, that human is a necessary part of the loop. The idea is not to use Gen AI to replace the human. It's to Gen AI is your new hire. You have to give them feedback. If you just turn that new hire loose with no guidance and no workflow to follow, what they produce is going to be, sloppy. But if you are giving them guidance and you're reviewing their work and you're taking their first draft and reviewing that and making your own suggestion and giving that feedback to them so they know to do better or different the next time, then those results improve. So, yeah, that's what this whole workflow is. It's that human in the loop. With the right structure going in, you ask the model to generate something for you. That don't consider that your final. That is like always think of that as your first draft, whether that's the first draft of the learning objective based on the goal you've given it, and then you can refine that, or whether that's the first draft of the content that is built based on those objectives. That's sort of a next step. Each step of the way, we think it's important that you review those results because it's going to result in a better end product for you, but it's also going to improve the model and what it can produce for you the next time. And that's the important step. That's not just a one-time through. Think of it in terms of looping through that workflow multiple times. What Gen AI really helps you do is reduce that time. The time and cost are greatly reduced. It's not that we necessarily couldn't do things like this in the past, but it would take so much longer. So that's an important part.
And like Amy mentioned in the chat that her team has like a master prompt that helps with some of these contextual aspects. So that can be something too, is you're iterating and improving. It's not just the AI iterating and improving, it's us too iterating and improving on what have we learned about better prompting or better instructions and guidelines and kind of creating a library of these resources and prompts that we can reuse with our team. Um, Okay, so Dave mentioned we have this human in the loop. This is a really important part. I know Jeremy mentioned hallucinations in the chat. Randy asked a question about it. How do you avoid hallucinations? So let's talk about what does good review look like. The first thing that good review looks like is accuracy, right? So Dave mentioned what comes out of generative AI. We want to consider a first draft. We also want to look at it like something is wrong here. Like AI is prone to hallucination. It will very confidently tell you the wrong answer. And it will tell you something that's not real. And so we have to have kind of our spidey senses up when we're reading something like, is that right? And this is where fact checking or double checking, or you can even, depending on, what model you're using, ask to, hey, can you link me to resources? Because again, like I don't know if you all have done this, but it will cite research studies that don't exist. If you ask it to give you a link to the research study, it'll be like, well, this never actually happened, but it could happen, or this is a compilation of all these different things. And so this is our responsibility for our company is, and for our learners, right? We want to prevent misinformation from being delivered to our learners, and we want to protect our company's reputation by reviewing first and foremost for accuracy. Is this correct? Um, Alignment to objectives. So we were talking in the chat about using AI for AI. So Teresa mentioned that we can use AI for tagging. AI can help us to figure out what tags to use, and then we can implement those tags, and then those tags are helpful. But we can also do this with objectives. We can say, hey, here are our learning objectives. This is my content. Does the content speak to the learning objectives? And same thing with assessments. We've actually had people do this with Intellum's Creator Agent, is they had developed content, created an assessment, and then found out that maybe the content didn't cover things that were in the assessment, or the assessment didn't comprehensively cover what was in the content. So you can kind of use it to look for, are we actually aligned learning objectives, content, assessment? Appropriate level and tone. And this could be part of our prompt in the beginning too, is what level of, often when I'm writing, I'm thinking about like 10th to 12th grade level. It's just something easy to consume and digest, pretty approachable, understandable. We're looking for inclusivity. We want to make sure we're avoiding bias. So this could be in the language that we use. It could be in the examples that we pull from. We're running it maybe through that lens. And then clarity and usability. Does this make sense? Can someone actually do something with this information, right? Because we want our education to be applicable, practical, and useful. And a good practice here when we're doing review is not just to read through something and think about these check marks in our brain and do that, but to actually have a rubric that says this is what great looks like. And then we can grade things against this rubric, provide that feedback to the AI, and then get better output in the future. So that's actually how we built our creator agent, was with a rubric where instructional designers could provide some feedback on output, give that back to the AI, and we could continue to make sure that it's actually meeting our standard criteria for what great looks like. So we do definitely want to do review. In terms of avoiding hallucinations, you can put guardrails on things, right? So even if we're thinking about applying AI to our learning programs, we can ask it to only find something, right? Like, let's say we want to find something in our LMS or we want to find information, it's not creating, right? So you can tell it, hey, don't create anything, just pull what already exists. Pull in a sentence, a paragraph, a link to something, and you can give it that guardrail. But I will tell you, like, there are times that I've used prompts that have guardrails and it still totally makes things up, right? And so this is where it's our responsibility to kind of steward AI well by reviewing the output and not assuming that what it's given us is perfect. And we still have a really important role to play here. All right. So kind of recapping, and I'll give this heads up that we're going to move into a time of Q&A. So if you do have questions about what we talked about, other things that are top of mind for you, again, we'll do our best to answer here, but we are not the AI experts. So if we don't have an answer, we know somebody who does. We'll go get some information from them. But if you have questions, please go ahead and put those in the Q&A at the bottom. But just kind of a recap of our conversation so far. AI is not a magic wand. It is very capable of doing a lot of things. It is an inevitable part of our future of work. But it's also not just something that we can point and things magically change. There is some work required on our side to train it and provide input, to review outputs, on the generative side. And then for the predictive side, making sure that we are working cross-functionally and that we are providing it with clean data that's structured and available and accessible. Like I was even talking to somebody about how one of the things that they've been working on is because their learning management system privacy settings are locked down, that some AI has a hard time accessing the content, right? So we're even just thinking about the accessibility of the content. Can the AI see the content, access the content to actually retrieve it? We talked about how predictive AI needs data, structure, trust. A big part, I think, for us is going to be like some people are very happy to use AI, and then someone was telling me the other day that there are websites now that don't have pages of the website. You just ask things of the website, and I was like, no, no, I am not ready for this version of the future. I don't want that. I want to be able to click through pages. So part of our job here too is helping our learners to learn how to trust the AI, how to adopt the AI that we're using so that when they're interacting with predictive recommendations, personalized learning paths, things like that, that they feel comfortable and prepared. We talked about AI readiness being cross-functional, and I will die on this hill of one of the best things that you can do for your learning program is to build cross-functional relationships. So with your BI and data analytics team, with your IT team, with your security and legal team, with other teams across the company, the people who are going to market and promote your programs, we want to have very close relationships because that's what makes our program successful, and that's what's going to allow us to successfully adopt AI. Gen AI needs onboarding and clear inputs. We want to treat it like any new hire. We want to give it context. We want to give it information. We want to review what it's doing, provide feedback so it can be successful. And of course, as humans, we have ultimate accountability for what the outputs are. So again, Q&A at the bottom. Randy asked, what is your favorite AI tool to use? I personally enjoy Midjourney and Sora. Do you have a go-to tool? Dave, I see you.
Yeah, I'll say I've got a favorite. I'm pretty passionate about this one. It's Notebook LM. Um, I love that one. That one is really getting closer to, like, from a learning perspective, what I expected AI to be, what
Mhm.
it would be. Um, if you haven't checked that out, definitely give it a try. It's really easy to use and it has really good results. I wouldn't use it for um, like formal learning that require, like, you're trying to build towards mastery, like a certification program, but for more informal learning, like, hey, I want to learn how to play the mandolin or I want to learn how to program in Python. Really good at that. And kind of the output it produces like really suits different learning styles too. So if you haven't checked out Notebook LM, which is a Google product, check that out.
Yeah, Christine Roberto and I talked about this last month, and I think we're all team ChatGPT, which sounds like really basic. But it is really fun, and we've gotten better at using it and learning from it. So that's the one using, but the ones that I'm pretty low key obsessed with, in terms of what they do is like HeyGen or Synthesia, these AI avatars, because you can provide it with a script and an AI avatar will deliver the content, but then you can also translate it in and dub it into other languages. So I'm like just obsessed with how cool it is. And so if you look up, I've been saying for a while, if you go to YouTube and you look up HeyGen's ad, it's just so neat, because you'll see the same person talking and they'll voice will change to different languages, but it's the same voice, same avatar. The mouth moves. It's this really neat application of AI, that I think will be really impactful for people's programs. Randy said Descript is great for that as well. Okay. Any other questions while we're here? All good. If not, we'll free you up for your afternoon. Ooh, Amy asked, what are some areas you think AI is not suited for? Dave, I'll let you start with that one.
Um, I think, and I think you can easily find people who are pretty passionate about this. It's some of like the more creative things, like the traditional arts, like AI is really good at creating music. And I enjoy experimenting with that, but I still think there's a big difference between what you can do with that versus like what an artist would truly do. So anything that are more traditional artistic pursuits, AI can do it, but I really don't like the idea of AI there. I want AI to, do the mundane things so I can focus more time on the artistic things.
Yeah. Oh, that's a good point. Yeah, I think, and when I think about what AI is not good for, I think there are a lot of things that it is good for, but I don't totally trust it, right? I want to review everything. I've tried to do data analysis where we get weird things, and so I'm a little distrusting of some things. Um, and then I think, huh, creative. And then same thing with strategy. Like I think it can be a helpful, or Dave, you and I were talking about this in terms of being a thought partner.
Mhm.
Right? Like I've spent a long time working in content of different varieties, and I have a really strong perspective on content. And so I'll work with like collaboratively with generative AI, but I won't let it do all the work for me, right? Because I have a vision for what this is, how I want to deliver it, how I want to structure it. I've got points of view, and so we're working more hand in hand. So I wouldn't give it entirely over. I think of it more as an assistive technology than just taking over everything there. Um, Lena had asked, could you give recommendations on best AI tools to learn AI, such as prompt creation, agents, things like that?
This isn't so much a tool, of course, but it's a person to follow who I think is really, she's a big advocate for AI and like really, um, really approachable person, how she like tries to educate people. And it's Allie Miller. So you can look her up on LinkedIn. It's Allie K. Miller. Um, I think she's very forward thinking. So it's like a great way to stay on like the leading edge of like what's coming next and what should you care about, what should you not care about, what can you do regardless of your technical level or expertise level, what can you do to get the most out of different tools. She's a great person to follow.
Yeah, I don't know, Lena, if it's necessarily best AI tools to learn AI, but I think there are a lot of great resources out there. So, like, I know the University of Northern Florida just did a whole like free certificate on learning AI. There are a lot of people out there kind of speaking, especially in the instructional design world, talking about AI and breaking it down in a way that's easy to understand. And they're sharing different models for how you think about even structuring prompts that are really useful. So I would probably look into some of those. And the other maybe caveat that I'd give here is AI is changing so rapidly, right? So it's like understanding some of those fundamental things could be really helpful, but also I think we'll be on this learning curve journey for quite a while here. Um, Bafana had asked, are there any AI tools or programs that you avoid? I don't think I have any right now that I avoid. There's some I'm just not using because I don't have the time and it's not like the highest priority to use them yet. But Dave, I don't know if you have any that you're thinking of that are just like bad.
Yeah, I wouldn't say that there are any that I have avoided. Like there's some that like I haven't tried DeepSeek, which is, sort of an alternative to ChatGPT. And there's others that just haven't really applied. I haven't had a direct application of my job to spend the time and to like, I haven't spent a ton of time with something like Cursor or Lovable, although I've experimented with them, but you know, I'm not actively avoiding these. I just don't, they're not important enough to my current work to spend more time with them.
Hmm. Okay. So
Um,
that to say, Bafana and Joyce, I don't know that we have one that we would avoid right now, so much as there are so many different models and so many that do different things. And one of the things I've heard is they're kind of like leapfrogging each other, right? You think about just how frequently people are shipping updates. That one of the recommendations I've heard is to like kind of pick one that you can get comfortable and familiar with and kind of stay there instead of hopping around because it does take time to learn and interact with all these different models. And so we can kind of get further faster if we just kind of pick one for now. Okay. And then Vibu had asked, Amy had a great recommendation. OpenAI has a nice academy for learning AI. That's a good call out, Amy. So people should grab that in the chat. And then Vibu had asked, how will AI help LMS administrators? Which I think is a great question, right? Like we see the application for generative AI for content creators, but for LMS admins, I think we have a lot of opportunities too, right? So Teresa had mentioned earlier, AI can help with tagging. And then Dave, I think you had mentioned some possible use cases around predictive analytics, recommendations, even if like I've thought it can flag like this course doesn't get anybody there or like people keep failing this question or it can surface insights for us that would just take way too much time manually to dig for and search for.
Yeah. And the other thing, and this is sort of a tease of the AI features that are in and coming to the Intellum platform, but how we see AI enhancing the administrator's experience is like helping so forget about content for a second. What about just managing the program and everything else about the program that goes with that? That could be everything from reporting to just finding who's enrolled in what, creating enrollments. So we have built in and have features coming that do things like allow you to just through a chat interface with the platform, instead of going out and building a report, just asking the platform, show me all of Shannon's overdue incomplete enrollments from last month, just in natural language, and it will write the report query for you. So it makes it easier for you. And our goal is for you to spend more time doing those things and manage your program without having to learn the whole platform. You don't have to be a platform expert to take advantage of all the best, most advanced features in the platform. And that's the goal of the manager agent within our platform, to do things like that.
That's a good point. I just wanted to know I never have any overdue enrollments, so this report is always going to be. But yeah, just being able to ask things of AI so it can do some of that manual work for you. So that's a great question. We're going to wrap up here for today. Thank you, everybody, for joining us. Thank you for your questions. We would love, again, after this webinar, there's a survey. Please take a moment to fill that out. And again, this is the first of 3 sessions today. So our next session is a panel discussion on AI native learning and development operations. We'd love to have you join us for that. But we'll let you go and we'll see you soon. All right.
Thanks, everybody.
Bye for now,
Bye.
everybody.